Imagine this. It's 1894. A Mormon bishop wakes up from a dream drenched in sweat, convinced that the Angel Moroni had just led him to a mountain east of Salem, Utah, where inside lies a Nephite gold mine. Not a metaphorical one, a literal treasure vault of ancient ore, golden plates, the sword of Laban, and divine instructions to dig. This wasn't just a dream, this was a calling, and John Hyrum Koyle would spend the rest of his life chasing it, tunneling into prophecy, defying church leaders, and convincing thousands that God had led a safety net buried in the Wasatch Mountains. Over a century later, the mine still hadn't produced a single ounce of gold. But that doesn't stop believers from holding on to their stock certificates like their Willy Wonka's golden tickets. Welcome to one of the strangest, most enduring folk prophecies in Mormon history. This is the story of the Dream Mine, and this is Mormonism Live. All right, folks. Radio Free Mormon will be joining me shortly, so I'll see him here in the studio in just a moment. But wanted to check in and see how everybody's doing. Very much appreciate all of you who follow our work, follow these shows, Mormonism Live, Mormonism After Dark, etc., etc. And we're grateful that each and every one of you are here. Tonight should be a fun episode. We'll stop for a moment when RFM gets into the studio. But until then, we'll start the show. Folks, I could just note, if you'll please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We're very grateful to have you do that. It helps the algorithm, helps the show up to a lot more people. And I think this will be a really fun one tonight. And so we'll catch up with you here shortly. So please do that. And then I see RFM down below. He's trying to get into the show, so he should be with us here in just a second. In the meantime, let's go ahead and put this up on the stage. And this is the episode on the Dream Mine. I've been preparing this one for a couple of weeks. This one was a lot of fun. I didn't know much about this work. RFM can't stay with us the whole night either, just FYI. He flew into Vegas. He is hanging out with Randy Bell, and he has to leave a little early tonight to go see a show. So that should be happening shortly. He'll probably leave here maybe 7:30 or so. So we'll be excited to hang out with him, get a little bit of time with him here. So let me start with this. A bishop with a prophetic dream. Who was John Hyrum Koyle? John Hyrum Koyle wasn't your typical miner. In fact, he started out as a farmer, born in 1864 in Spanish Fork, Utah. Koyle was a devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. From a young age, he believed he had a spiritual gift, the ability to receive prophetic dreams. One of his earliest recorded visions occurred in 1886, when he dreamed an angel guided him to find a lost cow. Does this sound familiar? It certainly has that ring of it, similar to Joseph Smith and his treasure digging, a lost item finder. And that was what John Hyrum Koyle, what sort of initiated him into this whole string of events. So he dreamed an angel guided him to find a lost cow injured with a horn in its eye. The next day, he reportedly found the cow exactly as seen in his dream. This uncanny experience strengthened his faith in God's guidance and in his own role as a receiver of divine messages. RFM, do you need me to bring you on? Yes. Okay. How are you?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm going to just check your mic settings. So let me just check a few things here. Okay. So how's life treating you?
I'm so excited to be here. I just came back from my first trip to an In-N-Out burger.
Oh, your first one. The In-N-Out here in Southern Utah has a line wrapped around it all the way till, all through the night.
It took a little longer than I anticipated. That's accounting for my tardy entrance.
Well, we're glad you're here, my friend. So we were just getting sort of the initial stages here of learning who John Hyrum Koyle was. I think you probably heard some of that
Yeah,
as you were hanging out there behind the scenes. So this is the slide one. Do you want to just switch every other one? Would that work for you?
absolutely.
Anything you want to
What's really
say?
funny?
Please.
What's really funny is that my friend Bruce, who baptized me, that I've talked about a bit,
Yeah.
we had creative writing class in 9th grade together. That's when I met him, and it was in Mr. Schmidt's creative writing class in Sumner Junior High School. And he, as part of creative writing, did a series of stories in which he had a hero, a young hero. And his young hero's name, consistent from story to story, was John Koyle.
Oh, look at that.
Total coincidence. So I asked him about it today. I sent him the link on this whole thing. I said, "Did you know this? Is this a coincidence?" He goes, "Yeah."
So he didn't know who this guy was.
He had no idea that his fictional young hero's name was actually patterned after a very real hero to some Latter-day Saints even today, and they think they're still going to find this Nephite gold.
Yeah, there's a lot of people still waiting to find this thing. They haven't given up hope, and there's a chunk of them. So there's that. I'll just note here, Southern States Mission Headquarters. This is a photograph of conference presidents and visitors in front of the mission headquarters taken 22nd May 1908. Building was located at 711 Fairview, Chattanooga, Tennessee. So I want to show that because that's where he went on a mission to. He went to the Southern States Mission. I'll let you read this one and we can keep pressing through.
Okay, great. This looks like a basketball player on the right. As a young man, Koyle served an LDS mission. You hearing me okay?
I hear you. I hear the sound isn't perfect, but it's
No.
good. It's fine.
This guy on the right, who is that guy? He looks like he's from Barnum and Bailey.
That's J. Golden Kimball.
That guy, that super tall guy, they're both the same guy. That's both of them are J. Golden, right?
Those are both the same guy.
The one on the right is after his experience, his unfortunate experience on the rack.
Yeah, he got his neck stretched or something because that neck is about 9 inches long. That's a long neck.
Maybe it's a wider picture, and they sort of, just maybe I don't know. That sometimes happens when I'm trying to edit my pictures. I'll end up squeezing them to get okay. As a young man, Koyle served an LDS mission in the Southern States from 1888 to 1891, where he gained a reputation for his dream visions that seemed to protect and direct him. And this is one of the key things that people need to understand. It's not just a dream mind. This is a dream / vision / revelation from God mind, right? One popular anecdote from his mission involves LDS leader J. Golden Kimball. According to later tellings, Koyle dreamed of a violent mob attacking a church conference and specifically targeting a very tall, freakishly tall, red-headed missionary, a description matching the colorful and famously red-haired elder J. Golden Kimball. So you wouldn't know this because it was only black and white back then. It was like Ginger Rogers. She was a redhead. That's why it's Ginger, right? But you wouldn't know because black and white. When told he wasn't there, the mob dispersed peacefully. Well, that's good. Kimball was so impressed that he quipped to Koyle, "If you ever have any more of those dreams, be sure to let me know." This early incident, loved by LDS folklore, by the way, which never happened, right? I mean, this dream never came true, did it?
So this guy has lots of dreams that witnesses say came true. And this seems to be one of the first ones. There's the one with the cow in the previous 2 slides ago.
Did they find a cow with the horn in its eye?
Yes.
That sounds painful. I got to tell you.
I hear you. And I don't want to discount that this didn't happen. I think by the time we get to the end, we're at least going to go, how does a guy, again, Joseph Smith sort of does this too. How does a person build a reputation on having dreams and prophecies come true? Then the only way is to have some things that at least ring sort of true somewhere along the way. And there may be
I'll ask you a question in return is how does a person make a living and reputation being a money digger, a money finder when he never finds anything except for a feather, maybe, or a little piece of wood that the shovel bounces off, or anything else you could imagine in your mind as being impressive other than gold?
Yeah.
Can I ask you at the beginning, has any gold ever been found in this gold mine?
Not a single flake.
Zero. It's been over 100 years. There are still people doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the power That's the power of a person with a face like this saying this kind of stuff in all sincerity and people believing. So, okay, so we talked about this early incident loved by LDS folklore cemented a lifelong friendship between Koyle and Kimball and hinted that Koyle truly believed his dreams could save lives and souls. By the early 1890s, John Koyle had returned to farming in Utah, and was well respected in his community as a faithful, hardworking family man. But his night visions, it sounds like dreams when you're asleep. I mean, I have dreams all the time too.
Yeah, but the moment they start coming true, they become night visions. So your young men shall dream dreams and your old men shall have visions.
Joel chapter 2. Very good, Bill. But his night visions were far from over. In fact, they were about to kick into high gear and change local history.
On the night of August 27th, 1894, John Hyrum Koyle had the dream that would define the rest of his life. In this profound vision, he later recounted Angel Moroni himself. This guy gets around, you know, he's going to visit James Brewster. He's hanging out with John Koyle. He's, of course, visiting the prophet Joseph Smith. Hello, Mary. He visits Mary. He gets around. This guy is guy's everywhere.
He's a traveling man like Ricky Nelson.
Yeah.
Used to sing about.
Moroni himself, the same heavenly messenger tied to the Book of Mormon, led him to a nearby mountain east of Salem. See, taking somebody to another hill too. So this has that kind of overlap.
Do they have mountains in Utah?
Wherever this guy is, I'll get to the location of this place because here.
If they do, it must be true.
Yeah, there are mountains in Utah. I know in Salt Lake City, there's plenty of mountains. I know down here in southern Utah, there's plenty of mountains. I think Utah has its fair share of mountains.
Okay.
So it must be true.
You know where Salem is?
I don't, because it's not the same Salem that Joseph Smith sent people to.
Right.
So this is completely different. This is in Utah, and it's about centered. Again, well, I think we'll have a map in here somewhere, but it's somewhere near like the center of Utah. But anyway, there Koyle was shown a hidden Nephite gold mine inside the mountain, an ancient treasure trove left by a lost civilization from the Book of Mormon. In 9 large caverns deep within the hill, he saw piles of rich ore and sacred artifacts of Nephite history. Here's another overlap. It's not just that Moroni takes him to a mountain, but like Brigham Young and others, he sees artifacts in that mountain, and those artifacts are from the Book of Mormon early history.
That's what I was thinking. Very similar to Brigham Young's story about going to the hill Cumorah, it opening up, walking in, and seeing all the gold plates everywhere. Well, I guess they got moved over to Utah.
Or South America or somewhere in the heartland. So it's all over the place. He saw piles of rich ore, sacred artifacts of Nephite history, the sword of Laban, Urim and Thummim, even plates of gold. Sound familiar? According to Koyle, the angel told him this hoard had been preserved to benefit the LDS Church in the last days.
Had been preserved to benefit the LDS Church in the last days?
This hoard of gold and artifacts. Yeah.
Hoard. Got it.
Not the whore of all the earth. No, the hoard. Been preserved to benefit the LDS Church in the last days, a time of coming disaster and economic collapse. So this stuff will be discovered right when the church needs it. I think it passed its moment because $293 billion later, I don't think the church really needs it. So
maybe they found it and they didn't tell anybody. That's why they got, $300 billion.
That's how they got it. According to Koyle, the angel told him that the hoard had been preserved to benefit the Latter-day Saints, the church in the last days, a time of coming disaster and economic collapse. Koyle's mission, the angel said, was to reopen the mine by digging new tunnels into the mountain. If he obeyed, the wealth inside would provide critical financial relief to the church and help gather the righteous in the last days before Christ's second coming. And he, by the way, I think this comes up somewhere later in the conversation, but he said it would happen sometime around the 12th president of the church. And we're
Spencer Kimball, I think.
Yeah, Spencer Kimball, Joseph Fielding Smith, somewhere in there was the 12th president of the church.
When I joined the church, the reason I know that off the top of my head is because when I joined the church, the missionaries who taught me put special significance. It was a passing comment. They didn't spend a lot of time on it, but they remarked that there's 12 apostles, right? And 12 is a significant number. And here's President Kimball, who's the 12th president of the church. Let your imagination fill in the rest.
There you go. There you go.
It was a mind-boggling commission. A humble farmer bishop was being asked to become a divinely appointed miner for the Lord's latter-day treasure vault. Naturally, Koyle was reluctant at first. By his own account, he pleaded that he knew nothing about mining and lacked the money or skills for such a huge project. But the heavenly messenger reminded John of his promise to serve God with his gift and gave him a very practical sign to confirm the calling. Here we have the feather that was found instead of the gold. Koyle was told that this neighbor, his neighbor, do we know who this neighbor is?
I don't have a name for that. There was nothing in the information about that.
It seems a significant omission.
Yeah.
Who had been drilling a well unsuccessfully would strike water the next day at exactly 12 o'clock noon. If this prophecy came true, it would be Koyle's proof that the dream was real and he must proceed. This story was in no way retrofitted after the fact. Sure enough, as the story goes, the next day at noon, a shout went up. The neighbor's well hit water right at 12 o'clock on the dot. Well, who can argue with this?
Yeah.
That was all the confirmation John Koyle needed. He was now convinced. This reminds me of something, by the way. He was now convinced that the Lord wanted him to dig for the Nephite gold. What it reminds me of is Daniel C. Peterson, the godfather of Mormon apologetics, also known as the Artful Dodger of Mormon apologetics. Although the stuff with the rods that Joseph and Oliver and Oliver's dad used to do, right? He swears that he has seen proof positive enough to convince him that water dousing with a rod is real and it works. Now, set aside the fact that it's never been scientifically reproduced under scientific circumstances, right? Never to my knowledge. But he had some experience where some guy did stuff with a rod and he found the water and he goes, Dan Peterson, not credulous at all. But he makes the shift too. If people today can use a rod to find water, then Oliver Cowdery maybe back in the day could use his rod to get revelation from God. It's a complete non sequitur, I think. The only commonality is the instrumentality. And I see John Koyle doing a similar thing, even if this really happened, which I have trouble believing.
And I'll just
don't know the name of the neighbor so he could confirm it.
Yeah, no. And I'll just note, I mean, there have been people who have fronted money who've said, I'll put up, $50,000, $100,000. And if anybody can demonstrate that this actually works in a way that is not just coincidence. In other words, if I dig a hole, there's a chance I'll find water. And if I dig 100 random holes, there's a certain percentage in a geographic area that I will find water if I dig so deep. And if you can prove that your dowsing rod works statistically significantly above that, then there have been people out there who have offered to pay, and nobody's ever been able to capitalize on that money.
It sounds like it's something that doesn't really work.
Right.
But he was now convinced that the Lord wanted him to dig for the Nephite water. Oh no, the Nephite gold. Within days, on September 17th, 1894, Koyle assembled a small team of 5 friends and began excavating the very spot shown in his dream. So in his dream, apparently like Joseph Smith, he was shown the very location in vision where he should find the gold. The era of the dream mine had begun.
Yeah, and I'll just say, we've been doing some of these historical episodes later and trying to spell out the entire story where we're reading the text off the screen. And I hope folks can see when it came to like the Kirtland Safety Society Bank episode. I can't remember what the last one was we did that was a bunch of history, but this one as well. It really does have to be written out. There's so many little twists and turns in what's going on. So I hope folks don't mind that. But here's that one. All right. So this is his wife, and there's a family photo of John Hyrum Koyle. Decent looking family there. It looks, that's his wife there on the right, Emily Arvia Holt. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Of course, she's long gone, so she won't care. And then this is where they started the digging in 1894. This is the mountain there in Salem, Utah, 60 miles south of Salt Lake City. So like I said, it's somewhere in the center sort of Utah.
Is that around Provo?
I'm going to guess a little south of that. So there's that. And then they got some ancient tunnel marked. I don't know what that means, but, and then the mill, and we'll see the buildings for the mill here later. That was also what made up the thumbnail picture. So there's that. I'll let you read this one.
The thought that keeps coming to mind, and I want to say it before I have to leave at the 6:30 Mountain Time. I'm still here for a long time, but I want to make sure I say this, is that this story is so similar to what Joseph Smith said. And in some ways, it appears to have been patterned off it. But the problem, and Joseph Smith never found any gold either, right?
Yeah.
And this guy never finds any gold.
Well, except for the gold plates, of course.
Yes, the gold plates.
Yeah.
Except for that gold.
Yeah.
Joseph Smith never found any. But it makes me wonder, okay, I think that as a Mormon, I would look at this and say, well, Joseph Smith was obviously telling the truth. And this guy, hi, Rebecca. Salem's 19 minutes south of Provo. Thank you. She's our navigator. Thank you, Rebecca. You're the best. And Dan Vogel, the military once used divining rods to check cars for bombs. How did that work out, Dan? Divining rods, those are high stakes. You want to make sure that that's going to work. I think they should just have the little mirrors that they go underneath the car so they check for it. Maybe that's the divining rod with a mirror on the other end. Anyway, all I'm saying is I would have said, well, Joseph Smith was obviously telling the truth, but this guy is whacked out. And I'm looking at it thinking, from this point of view, which I think is a little more objective now, how do I distinguish between this guy's story and Joseph Smith's story such that I would believe the one and not the other?
Right. Other than Joseph does get the book. So the eventual main treasure is discovered, translated into sacred writ, whereas this guy is still looking for the first flake.
Yeah, it's like what he's doing is exactly what the Angel Moroni told Joseph Smith not to do, which is use the gold for his own personal benefit. But he's changed that. It's not for my personal benefit. No, it's for the benefit of the church.
Yeah. And actually, I think it's my turn to read, so I'll read this one. Koyle's mine was situated on a rugged hill, now called Knob Hill, on the slopes of the Wasatch Mountains just outside of Salem. Work started in 1894 with simple tools, but this was no ordinary mining venture. It was driven by faith and visions rather than geology. Early on, Koyle claimed he was following a mysterious cream-colored leader, a whitish rock vein in the mountain as a guide for the tunnel. He would describe peculiar rock formations or markers that his crew then reportedly found exactly as he had foreseen once they dug far enough.
It's amazing all the things they can find except for gold.
It is. But you're going to find in the story, RFM, every step along the way, something provincial happens where they go, we just got to keep going. The Lord is telling us that we're getting there, we just got to keep going.
We're getting all these incredible signs except for no effing gold.
No gold.
Which is the whole point of it, I think.
Yeah. He would describe peculiar rock formations or markers that his crew then reportedly found exactly as he had foreseen once they dug far enough. To his followers, it seemed the mine's progress was guided step by step by prophetic dreams. The mission attracted both devoted believers and curiosity seekers from the LDS community. Over time, perhaps 50,000 people were directly or indirectly involved with the project, whether as workers, investors, or simply fascinated onlookers. Despite years of labor, the mine wasn't yielding precious metal yet. But Koyle and his men pressed on with optimism. They believed they literally had a golden guarantee from heaven that treasure lay ahead, buried deep behind a prophesied 3-foot thick capstone of rock. Koyle also warned that the journey would have hardships. He predicted that 3 men would lose their lives before the mine's destiny was fulfilled. Tragically, over the years, guess what? 3 different workers indeed died in separate accidents on the mountain, which followers took as a grim fulfillment of prophecy. Each event only reinforced their conviction that everything was unfolding just as foreseen.
So I'm guessing these were the 3 miners who weren't wearing their garments.
They must have been. And most of the pictures, I'll try to note when a picture is not from this incident. There were a few times where I wanted to put some sort of image to capture the audience. And I actually think this is one of them that's not actually from the Dream Mine. I'll try to remember to note.
It says gold mining, New England.
Yeah.
And then something else that I can't see in the bottom right.
Yeah, that's just an old picture. And I just wanted folks to sort of get the idea of a mine being opened up and things starting. So, all right.
Okay, as the operation grew, Koyle needed funding to continue digging because he's not getting any gold out of this mine. In March 1909, he formally incorporated the mine as the Koyle Mining Company and issued 114,000 shares of stock to raise capital. Faith in the venture was strong enough that approximately 42,000 shares were sold to the public at $1.50 each, which would be a lot more than it is today, $1.50, for stock with a par value of $1, a premium price reflecting the hopes of big returns. Remarkably, even some prominent LDS figures bought in. Can you imagine? For example, the irrepressible J. Golden Kimball, by then a well-known church leader, held stock, as did Apostle Matthias F. Cowley. He's the guy who did all the miracles among the Maori. Apostle George Teasdale, no, that was his son, Matthew Cowley. Apostle George Teasdale, and even a nephew of LDS Church President Heber J. Grant. These were not fringe dissidents, but respected men who found Koyle's project at least plausible. In 1910, oh my gosh, it started when? 1894? This is now 16 years later.
Yep.
And they're just toiling at this. In 1910, as the years of their life unreal, pardon the pun. So it's 1910, Koyle himself was sustained as bishop of his local ward, the Leland ward, indicating he was still in reasonably good standing with the church at that time. For a while, it seemed the dream mine was almost blending into normal LDS life, just another community endeavor, albeit an unusual one. However, clouds were on the horizon. By the early 1910s, the mine was hundreds of feet deep and still no treasure in sight. You know, it's too bad God couldn't tell him that at 12 o'clock noon on a certain day, they were going to hit gold, but apparently that's beyond his capability. God deals in water. By the early 1910s, the mine was hundreds of feet deep and still no treasure in sight. Rumors swirled about Koyle's claims and the fantastic Nephite artifacts he said awaited discovery. More troubling, John Koyle began sharing new prophecies that put him on a collision course with LDS leadership. The most famous instance came in 1911, sparked by an announcement from church president Joseph F. Smith.
In 1911, Joseph F. Smith visited LDS colonies in Mexico. And remember, we talked about this a few episodes ago, where the church, in its effort to keep polygamy going while not practicing it itself, this was in the polygamist breakoff groups when we did the LDS factions episode. And when the church leaders, Wilford Woodruff and others, sent church members out, they sent them to Mexico and to Canada primarily, although some of that still existed in the United States as well. And so Joseph F. Smith is going to visit one of these LDS colonies in Mexico. The church was under great strain at the time. The Reed-Smoot hearings in the United States Senate had recently scrutinized the church over polygamy and political influence. To appease authorities, the church was distancing itself from plural marriage. And Joseph F. Smith urged the Mexican saints to abandon polygamy. You know, after all this time, all this hardship, and us telling you, no matter what, you go to Mexico, and no matter what, do not abandon polygamy. and then he goes and tells them to abandon polygamy. To uplift them, he promised that the next LDS temple would be built in Mexico. This was a bold commitment from the prophet of the church. When John Koyle heard of this promise, he openly contradicted it. Koyle said that Joseph F. Smith wouldn't make a promise like that if he had seen what I saw in a dream, unquote. In a daring prophecy, Koyle claimed that instead of a temple, the Mexican saints were about to face war and exile.
Really?
He predicted that revolutionary forces in Mexico would drive the Latter-day Saint colonists out of the country, allowing them to take only a little luggage with them. In essence, he prophesied that the Mexican Revolution was imminent, and the proposed temple would not happen anytime soon.
Okay, but Bill, were the Mexican saints forced out of the country as a result?
Partial fulfillments of prophecies works pretty well. Just ask Joseph Smith in the Civil War prophecy.
Absolutely, because I have the sense you're looking at the positive thing and ignoring the other parts, which is very natural for us to do as human beings, especially for faithful Mormons. Yeah. This created a tense prophetic standoff.
By the way, I think this does come more true than you suggesting that nobody had to leave. So actually, I think there was some evacuation, and I think we'll see that here.
Okay. This created a tense prophetic standoff, the church president versus the dream mind seer. Which vision would come true? By 1912, news of Koyle's bold prophecy spread among members, causing a mix of anxiety and curiosity. And sure enough, history sided with Bishop Koyle on this one. In the summer of 1912, the Mexican Revolution erupted in force. Rebel leaders Pancho Villa and others, or is it Villa? It's Villa, right? Bill?
Pancho Villa.
I think so.
Yeah.
And others attacked the Mormon colonies, and due to the chaos, the U.S. government helped evacuate the Latter-day Saints. As Koyle foretold, families fled Mexico with only about one piece of baggage each, abandoning their homes and that hoped-for temple. The temple promise was left unfulfilled. In fact, an LDS temple wouldn't be completed in Mexico until many decades later. Koyle's dream had seemingly come to pass in dramatic fashion, while the church president's assurance fell flat. So I got to ask you, Bill, you know, these kind of rebellions, revolutions, wars don't happen overnight. There are things that lead up to them generally, and usually for years before it breaks out in open warfare. So was he reading the tea leaves? Were there tea leaves to be read, do you know?
I don't know, because if I'm not mistaken, we covered some of this history in, remember the Third Convention? And I think there was some Mexican history that included the Mexican Revolution that played into that, those conventions that were held in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, but it seemed to me, if I remember right, that there was years of pressure on both sides and things sort of building up, and which is also what happens when Joseph Smith talks about the Civil War starting in South Carolina. South Carolina is one of the flashpoints, and it had been sort of leading up to that over a long amount of time, you know, years and decade or so.
30 years.
Yeah. So there's that.
You could almost say it was started at the beginning of the Constitution and relegating slaves to less than full person status. I think that's in the Constitution. It's not the Declaration, it's the Constitution, I'm pretty sure. So anyway, but who is this John Koyle? Upon what meat doth this our John Koyle feed, that he hath grown so great? Who is he think he is to challenge the church president?
Yeah, and again, he builds loyalty from his followers, because again, it seems like what Koyle says comes to pass.
Except for the gold part.
Except for the flakes of gold. Not a single flake. Yeah. This was a huge embarrassment to LDS leadership. It's one thing for a local folk prophet to talk about buried gold. It's another for him to undercut the credibility of the president of the church. After the Mexico episode, the patience of the hierarchy evaporated. In August 1913, the first presidency of the LDS Church issued a formal public warning aimed squarely at Koyle's mind. The statement, titled "A Warning Voice," admonished the saints not to invest in speculative mining ventures based on dreams or visions. Without naming Koyle, it was clearly targeting him. The first presidency warns the saints against investing in worthless stock, even if the promoters allege they are guided by dreams and revelations, unquote. The notice read, it went on, that's what the notice read. It went on to counsel members not to be led by anyone antagonistic to duly appointed church authorities. This happens every time. We watched it to some degree sort of unfold with Michelle Stone recently. Promoters of dream minds and vision enterprises were explicitly singled out as bad influences. In other words, stay away from Koyle's mind. Trust your prophet in Salt Lake City, not a prophet in Salem. Now, I wish he had struck gold, because then somebody would have egg on their face, and somebody else would be a new prophet of a new church. But that's not how it unfolded. This stern message was published in the Deseret News, church-owned newspaper. Again, I add that in just because, folks, there's we've come to find out that 30% of our audience are not Mormons. They're just interested in Mormonism. So that's really cool. On August 16th, 19th.
Subject. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Can I say something about this?
Yeah.
It's 1913. At least we know that the church as an institution and as a presidency is capable of issuing these kind of warnings against aberrant Mormons within the church. which highlights the absence of modern day church leaders doing the exact same kind of thing, same kind of warning about visions of glory, about Chad and Lori Daybell, about Jody Hildebrandt, and about possessed children, right?
Even TV shows on Netflix, you know, that are going to endanger the testimony of the saints.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They did do that one. But where people are getting killed, Mormon children are getting killed, literally, and I'm not exaggerating, they're silent.
Yeah. It was published August 16th, 1913, and even reread in church meetings to ensure that everyone got the memo. And you can see it there on the right. That is a warning voice to the officers and members of the Church of Jesus Christ, the Latter-day Saints, and it has that. And so you've got page 2 of that on the left, and it was also reprinted in the Deseret News, and that's the article from the Deseret News on the right.
Okay, Bill.
Yes.
Bill, can you go back for a second? I'm sorry. I know you got a lot to get through.
Yep.
But look at the first sentence of the last paragraph of that statement on the left. Be not led by any spirit or influence that discredits established authority and contradicts true scientific principles and discoveries. I mean, they're pulling the rug out from under themselves. They're cutting off the branch on which they're sitting.
Yeah, that is interesting because the church would not want to say that science leads out, especially a church that still wants to claim that there was a global flood and a Tower of Babel. So,
yes, and a 6,000-year-old Earth, etc.
Yeah. Yep. So you have the periodical. I don't know if this was. Did it say maybe the Messenger?
It looks like a separate publication of the same warning voice.
Yeah, one was in the church periodical at the time, and I didn't know if it was like the Messenger and Advocate or which one it was. And then the other one was in the Deseret News. So the Deseret News is on the right.
Okay.
Page 2 is on there on the left of the periodical. Here's the Deseret News again. This is August 16th, 1913. I put the paper in there. I couldn't get that blue off of there. I'm really sorry about that. But on the right is the Dream Mine. I don't really, you know, we could make it bigger and read it. I don't really want to spend time doing that, but it is just the church warning everyone around not to be investing in this dream mine. And it only comes, again, this guy got called as a bishop. There was plenty of time to see this guy as crazy and to get away from him. The church saw him as worthy and approved the calling that the local stake president sent in to be the bishop of that Leland ward. And up until that moment, at least, many leaders in the church even had an affiliation with him and with the mine. But it seems like when he contradicted the president of the church, all that goodwill had come to an end. So I'll let you read this one.
That'll do it, by the way.
Yeah, always.
You're doing crazy stuff all you want and bilking people out of stock for a fake gold mine with Nephite gold in the middle of Utah, of all places. That's all fine. In fact, some of the leaders will buy into it and buy the stock. But when you come out and you challenge the top dog, then everybody abandons you and you are cast to the wolves.
Can I just say, too, to that, you can watch it in real time. I'll give you an example. David Darush Alexander. If you watch David Alexander will get in no trouble so long as all he does is tell the members of the church to be excited about the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And David, I think David's going to be happy just collecting his YouTube ad revenue and getting whatever views he gets living out of his camper. He's going to be thrilled. But if David ever decides to start to disagree with church leaders, he will be abandoned faster than than David abandoned, I guess, that second or third call he was in, because the first one he stayed for a while.
I think it is just a matter of time. I have only one word to say about David Alexander. You know what it is?
What's that?
Hello. Where were you?
You're here reading this one.
Oh, that's where you are. The fallout was swift. Just 5 days after the warning, John Koyle was released from his position as bishop, surely a coincidence, of the Leland ward, despite his congregation's unanimous vote to keep him. That sounds like that's a violation.
They don't do that anymore, do they? Hey, anybody, we're going to get rid of this guy unless you guys want to keep him. All hands who want to keep him raised, please, to the square. All right.
By the way, this could be a significant point in the timeline of votes being made meaningless in the LDS Church.
Yeah, it's probably right.
The church opposition, essentially declaring the dream mind a delusion at best, a fraud at worst, created a strange divide among church members. Many regular folks and even some local leaders believed in Koyle's visions, or at least saw no harm in holding a little dream mind stock for a rainy day. Yet the official church stance was now firmly against it, and owning dream mind stock quietly became an act of defiance. Koyle, for his part, was not backing down from his claims, but he was a loyal church member and didn't want open conflict. Then, as if out of a chapter of scripture, new characters entered the story. In January 1914, Koyle claimed he received an otherworldly visitation. He awoke one night to find two mysterious men standing by his bed. They revealed themselves as two of the three Nephites. What was the third one doing? I don't know.
Yeah, why only two?
He was going to an In-N-Out burger joint, so he was late. They revealed themselves as two of the three Nephites, legendary immortal beings in Mormon folklore who were blessed to roam the earth. That's a blessing. Until Jesus' return, these ancient Nephite messengers delivered a mixed prophecy. They told Koyle that due to misunderstanding, the LDS Church would continue to oppose him and the mine, and the operation would indeed be shut down for a time. However, they urged him to be patient and promised that in time the mine would reopen and ultimately fulfill its destiny.
Just a note, by the way, two of the three Nephites, if I'm not mistaken, in Lucy Mack's history of her family, the progenitors of I forget what the exact title of the book is, but the progenitors of something in the life of Joseph Smith, she tells of the incident where David Whitmer needs to tend to his farm, but Whitmer wakes up in the morning and the farm had been tended, and the response from one of the neighbors is that there were two old men out there working all night or whatever. There was two men working it. And
it was two?
Yes. And so there was this response back from Whitmer, or whoever is telling the story, whoever is making up the story, says that they thought maybe it was two of the three Nephites. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that's the case. And I just want to note that John Koyle consciously, unconsciously, intentionally, unintentionally is connecting with lots of stories from church history, sort of in the same way that Mark Hoffman connects with things, by grabbing a small detail somewhere and having something similar to that detail that isn't in the main LDS narrative.
I wasn't prepared to talk about this tonight, so I hope I'm right. I might be wrong, but it's interesting that these two Nephites in this story, as well as the one you were talking about, Bill, they fulfill the function of the mythical creature, that subdivision of the fairy folk, which I think are called brownies, which are the ones who come and do good deeds for people, like the cobbler in the elves, right? And they'd come in and finish his work for him, making the shoes at night while he was asleep. So that's what these guys are overgrown brownies.
And the Cleveland Browns often use as a mascot a brownie elf. So if anybody wants to go online, they can just look up an image, just like type in brownie elf, and you'll see pictures of brownies.
I can think of few NFL teams more in need of brownies than the Browns.
Yeah, it's hard to play your best though when an elf is your team identity. No wonder they're losing, you know.
My first father-in-law went to a junior high school who we passed by it in Austin. I think it was Lamar Junior High, and their mascot was the Scotties. And I would always rib him, and I'd say, yes, Lamar Junior High School, home of the Fighting Scotties. Where am I?
It's the last paragraph.
Thank you. Crucially, they also warned Koyle never to write or sign any document about the mine, a warning whose significance would only become clear decades later. The Nephite envoys then spent 2 hours outlining the future. The first half hour of revelations Koyle was allowed to share with others, but the remaining hour and a half of prophecy he was commanded to keep secret. See, that's totally different than the Book of Mormon plates, because the Book of Mormon, it's 1/3 and 2/3. This is like 1/4 and 3/4. Totally different. two Nephites. Wait a second. One imagines these two Nephites gave Koyle and his inner circle plenty to chew on, including hints of trials ahead and eventual triumph.
By the way, again, this is another overlap. There are moments, one I can think of is when Moroni visits Joseph Smith. He is permitted and encouraged to share certain aspects, and other aspects he is not to write down or to talk about. And I think there's multiple moments in early church history where that kind of thing is happening, where a revelation is given, a part of it is revealed, and a part of it is kept.
First vision is a classic example. Same with Moroni. And it's really very smart to do, because what you do is you give yourself extra space to fill in the story later without being accused of making it up.
Yep. A great tactic. All right. Not long after, the church made good on its ultimatum. Later in 1914, LDS leaders threatened to excommunicate Koyle if he didn't cease mining. By the way, this is another picture that is not from the history of this dream mine. Okay. Whatever this is meant to be a mine, but you can see that it's some sort of attraction, because right out the other side is the tunnel leading to some other building or something. So
I thought they were going to make Koyle take down all his podcasts about the dream mine chip.
They told him he had to take every episode down.
Yeah.
And so he just allowed someone else to put it on their channel. That way he could avoid church discipline, but keep the content.
And Joseph F. Smith totally fell for that ruse.
Yeah. Yes. Reluctantly and consistent with Nephite prediction, the Nephites' prediction, Koyle shut down the active work on the dream mine. The Great Dig went dark for the next 6 years, from 1914 to 1920. For Koyle's faithful followers, it was a period of waiting and testing. They still believed in the prophecy, but now they also had direct confirmation via the Nephites that opposition would be part of the journey.
So after the opposition starts, the Nephites show up and tell them opposition is going to be part of the deal.
Yeah. Now we're 20 years later, and then we've got this 6-year period of darkness too. So 26 years in from the very beginning. It is. They still believed in the prophecy, but now they also had direct confirmation by the Nephites that opposition would be part of the journey. Interestingly, LDS church leaders might have hoped that closing the mine would end the saga, but it didn't. In fact, a quirk of finances brought the dream mine roaring back to life in the 1920s with a little help from none other than the president of the church.
What?
Yeah, this story just keeps going and going.
That's looks like Heber J. Grant. He was into banking, wasn't he? Booms, busts, and prophecies in the pit. It's a picture of the Spanish Fork Co-op. By 1920, the shuttered mine project had accumulated some debt. About $2,000 was owed to the local Spanish Fork Co-op store for supplies. LDS Church President Heber J. Grant became aware of this outstanding bill at church-owned ZCMI, perhaps through routine business. According to Dream Mine lore, when President Grant realized that reopening the mine could allow Koyle's group to repay the debt, he gave the go-ahead to resume digging. Now, this is lore, so this is questionable, right?
Correct.
Yeah, because it seems hard to believe he would do that, given what had just happened with the prior president that he was good buddies with and served with forever. In September 1920, after 6 quiet years, the dream mine sprang back to life. Koyle and his crew returned to their picks and shovels and now some modern equipment, driving the main shaft even deeper into Nob Hill. By the mid-1920s, they had extended tunnels to about 2,200 feet in depth and a total of 5,000 feet of shafts and drifts meandering through the mountain rock. It was an impressive engineering feat, especially without finding any rich ore. You know, the odds are you'd find something, but these guys managed to miss every single vein of gold.
They end up finding something. It's not going to have as much value. We'll get to it here in a minute, but they do end up mining something here. Okay. But no, they never find gold.
Well, that's too bad. A test
not even Tumbaga.
You know, I can create my own lore and say, if you ever get a visit from 2 personages saying to be the two of the 3 Nephites, you can't trust them. You got to wait till you have all 3 Nephites present. It was an impressive engineering feat, especially without finding any rich or a testament to sheer belief and determination. I think it certainly was. This is amazing what these people went through for a guy who says, I had a dream.
Yeah, Martin Luther King gets killed. This guy gets to go 20-something years and nobody finds anything.
Yeah, at least Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream has, moved the needle, right?
Yeah.
This guy, nothing. But you say he found something, so maybe there's a happy ending to the story.
Well, I wouldn't say that. All right, is this did you finish reading this one? I'm sorry,
I did.
Off. Okay. John Koyle continued to bolster his followers with prophecies and promises during this period. He often spoke of an impending economic disaster that would make the mine's riches desperately needed. In a famous instance, Koyle allegedly warned his stake president, who was also a local bank owner, in mid-1929 that a terrible financial crash was only months away. When the prophesied time frame was nearly up, the skeptical stake president noted that nothing had happened, to which Koyle replied that there was still one day left. Now, see, this is, again, folklore, right? But this also has overlap. This reminds me of 3rd Nephi, when the people are sort of like, nope, the time is pretty much past. We're going to go ahead and hunt you down and kill you now.
For the sign to be given, of which Samuel the Nephite, that was his brother, Samuel the Lamanite prophesied that Jesus would be born into the world over there on the other side of the world.
Yep.
Yes, you're right.
And then 30 years later, he's supposed to show up here, or there's supposed to be a sign that he is, and nothing happens. And they're ready to hunt down the believers and to persecute them or kill them.
All the hallmarks of a story that was made up later.
Yeah.
Unless you got something that's contemporary and irrefutable, that he actually said this in October of 1929. I mean, he'd been saying it for how many years now? 29 plus 6 is 35 years. He's been saying for 35 years, there's this huge financial crash in the offing. And now there's going to be one, right? So this is going to be the crash that happens. Now, one would think that if the consistency were at all involved here, that he would have found some gold before the big crash, because that was the whole point of it.
Yeah, you hope that people take advantage of your warning prophecies, but there was one day left. Eerily, the very next day was October 29th, 1929, the date of the catastrophic Wall Street stock market crash that triggered the Great Depression. Dream Mine believers rejoiced at everyone losing their money. They rejoiced at Koyle's foresight. He had predicted the 1929 crash to the day, at least according to faith-promoting stories later recounted. Skeptics might reasonably question when that prophecy was recorded, or if it was remembered after the fact. But in Utah County, many took it as evidence of Koyle's prophetic gift.
This is very much like the Jehovah's Witnesses, too, who prophesied, among other dates, that Jesus would return in 1914.
Yeah.
And he didn't show up. But guess what started? World War I. The U.S. didn't get involved until 1917, I think. But 1914, so we're right. We were right. We were just wrong. But we were right about being wrong.
And there's more than one instance, I think, in this slideshow, if I remember right. But this is one of them where, if you'll notice the date on the newspaper, it's October 24th, 1929. And so I don't know if it's, again, if the stock market were to crash today, for instance, when Donald Trump issued Liberation Day with his tariffs, right? The market goes down a certain amount one day, it goes down a bunch the next day, it goes down a bunch the next day. Everyone's sort of trying to find where this bottom is. And I would imagine that when the stock market crashed in 1929, that it was sort of that same thing, where it didn't do it all at once over the course of one day, but rather over the course of several days, and maybe even rebounding a little bit before crashing more.
I was trying to look up the date just to confirm it. I find out that there's a Black Monday that happened in 1987. That was, of course, more recent. I remember it was in law school. That was Black Monday.
That was Jimmy Carter, right?
Yeah, this was maybe a Thursday. I can't remember.
So it's probably Reagan or Bush.
It was Reagan.
Yeah.
1980 to 1988. Well, anyway, I'm sure you're right. October 29th.
All right. Let me, I think I've got this one read. Yep. So you can take this.
And what is this a picture of here? Can you?
This is their facility there at the Dream Mine. It's still there today. This mine is still actively running. They do enough every year to maintain their licenses. And because if you own a mine, you have to do so much digging of the mine. You have to use it or lose it. And so every year they file the appropriate paperwork and they do enough digging to pass that threshold. And this is the what do I want to call this? This is the facility where they sort through things and capture whatever has some worth to it. But again, no gold has ever been found. Although, again, we'll get to it. Something was found, and we may see that here in the next few slides.
Like a sluice, maybe.
Well, yeah, I know what you mean by sluice, but I don't know. Maybe we'll come across the word here, but it's just a sorting facility. Yes.
Yeah, it looks really interesting. The 1930s brought a mix of hope and disappointment. In 1929, around the time of the crash, miners did discover a small deposit of platinum in the Dream Mine.
Yeah, there it is.
That's more valuable than gold, isn't it?
Let me look up what platinum is today. Platinum.
Gold's a little over. It's a lot better than going gold.
Yeah, gold is right a little over $3,000 today. But I will say platinum is a little more difficult to get it separated from other things. So platinum looks like it is $979 an ounce. So it's actually less.
Much less.
Than gold.
That's just one of those things I heard as a kid. Thanks for looking that up.
Yeah.
It wasn't the Nephite gold of prophecy, but it was something valuable. Damn it. Perhaps a divine hint? Spurred on, Koyle's operation took a bold step. They decided to build a large ore processing mill, nicknamed the White Sentinel, to handle the massive riches they expected to extract any day. Construction on the mill began in the mid-1930s and was completed by 1936. Well, at least somebody had a job. When they ran a batch of ore through it, however, the result was underwhelming. The first and only load of ore processed was worth just $103.03. Now, granted, that's more than today, but I got a feeling this wasn't enough to justify building this thing. After that single run, the shiny new mill fell idle and was shut down the next year, having never fulfilled its intended purpose of refining heaps of gold. It stood as a white elephant, or perhaps a white sentinel of dashed hopes, on the hillside, silently awaiting better days that never came.
Throughout the Depression era, outside experts occasionally weighed in. In January 1933, a geology professor named Frederick J. Pack published an analysis of mineral samples from the Dream Mine, declaring them practically worthless in terms of precious metals. Such reports did little to deter true believers, but they did attract the attention of government regulators. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, that might sound familiar to people, that is otherwise known as the SEC.
I believe that matter's closed, Bill.
Yeah, then we consider the matter closed. They investigated the Dream Mine Company in the 1930s, concerned about possible fraud. Now, you can picture this, RFM. These people go around, they sell stock, and they dig in this mine for decades and decades and never find anything, but they keep digging and they keep selling stock and they keep assuring people it's coming. And so the SEC goes, this sounds like a ruse. What they weren't prepared to find is that these are just crazy religious zealots who are just sure that someday something will come to pass. And
right, it's not an intentional fraud, it's an unintentional fraud.
Yeah, and we'll see here as I read the rest of this, and I think maybe the next slide too, we will see that the SEC just goes, these are just people that are actually spending all the money that comes in appropriately, trying to find gold, and they're just not willing to give up. And as dumb as that might be, the U.S. government isn't going to stop somebody from following the rules, even if they can't find something.
Right.
So the
because
U.S.
they weren't creating 13 dummy shell companies and filing fake 13Fs with the SEC.
No, they're following the rules. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission investigated the Dream Mine Company, concerned about possible fraud. After all, stock was being sold in a mine that never produced gold. In the end, the SEC found no evidence of intentional fraud. In other words, this guy's mind is more honest than the LDS Church.
It is also backward. We're selling all this stock for a gold mine that's never present one flake of gold. And then we're building this huge ore producing facility in anticipation that there's going to be gold. And this is in the 1930s. How long have they been digging at this thing?
30 years. Since 1894, so 36 years.
They've been digging for at least 3 decades at this. They haven't found any gold, but I tell you what, let's build a huge mine or what do you call it?
Or processing
facility. By the way, I'm having such a great time. I'm looking at the clock. I got 9 minutes before I got to be out of here.
Yeah, you'll take off. We'll finish the episode without you, but let's see how far we can get. So, in the end, the SEC found no evidence of intentional fraud. Notably, the money raised from investors appeared to have been genuinely spent on developing the mine, sinking shafts, building the ore mill, etc., which was actually worth more than the funds taken in.
Oh.
So they actually had more assets value than money they had taken in from stock purchases.
So they're not pocketing it.
No, they are even maybe spending some of the money out of their own pocket to fund this, which again is a little different than Salt Lake. Let's see here. And critically, the stockholders themselves weren't complaining. They remained apparently satisfied. So, the SEC goes, hey, you guys that have been buying stocks, are you feeling like you've been tricked? Are you feeling? No, we're excited. This is going to happen someday. And I can imagine the SEC guys going, I don't know what we can do here. I think we just have to go back to Washington.
This is Josiah Stoll in the 1826 Bainbridge trial. He's not complaining. He's happy. No. He believes Joseph Smith can see treasure. He just can't find any to save his soul, but he believes it anyway, in spite of the failure to prove it. This is a continuing theme.
Yeah. They remained apparently satisfied that their money was going toward the holy enterprise. In other words, it wasn't a classic get-rich-quick scam lining Koyle's pockets. It was more like a non-profit prophecy project.
This is a get-rich-slow scheme.
This is a get-rich-slow scheme, yes. The faithful were willingly buying into a dream, not so much to get immediate returns, but to be part of a prophesied salvation down the line. With no fraud charges, Koyle and his dream mine carried on. During World War II, Koyle added even more lore to his prophetic resume. Right after Pearl Harbor in 1941, he allegedly told associates that the war would end on a very specific date. Here's another one of these instances where the newspaper and the claim of revelation are on two different dates. So he told them that the war would end on a very specific date, August 27th, 1945. That prediction was so oddly precise that it reportedly made it into the local newspaper's sports column as a curiosity. The writer, Lee Goetz of the Deseret News, was skeptical and perhaps a bit amused. So the sports writer says, hey, Koyle says this is going to happen, and let's just find out. Let's write it down and see.
Where's the article?
Oh, I couldn't find it.
Yeah, there is no article. Yeah, I would be quite surprised if there were an article.
So folks, you can go digging. We'd love to see it if you do find it. That would be fun.
I wish you more luck than John Koyle had finding gold.
The war did end almost exactly on that timeline.
Oh, almost exactly. And then, by the way, it's just for the Japanese because it was in May for the Germans.
Yeah. August 1945, the atomic bombs were dropped, and by August 14th, 1945, the Japanese had agreed to surrender.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that almost makes it sound like he really did say August 27th because it's close, but no cigar. It's the same month, but no, he's wrong.
Yeah. But it's so close. Right. It's so close that if you have belief persistence, if you have confirmation bias, you're still seeing miracles.
He came so close to finding the gold too. He was just a little bit off, so he never quite found it.
The August 14th, 1945, Japanese had agreed to surrender. It's an almost hit for Bishop Koyle's dream diary, at least in the eyes of his followers.
I still want to see the article.
Yeah.
Koyle's string of prophetic hits also include, he can do everything. He can do everything except find gold. Koyle's string of prophetic hits also included a forewarning of a devastating flood of muddy water that he said would sweep through Utah communities, signaling the beginning of really big troubles. Decades after his death in 1930, see, 83, are you kidding me? Eventually, everything's going to happen. Everything's eventual, as Stephen King put it, because eventually everything will happen. And if you just wait long enough, you'll be a prophet. I mean, look at the Mormons who look at Gordon B. Hinckley talking about saving for a time of need, right? And that's going to be alive forever. Any time of need comes up, Gordon B. Hinckley was a prophet, no matter when it happens or how far removed. So, decades after his death in 1983, record floods in Utah sent muddy water running down city streets statewide. Oh my gosh, he is such a prophet, causing hundreds of millions in damage. To believers, this was Koyle's prophecy coming true from beyond the grave. By mid-century, John Koyle had built up an impressive mythos. He had predicted everything from economic crashes to war and natural disaster, at least according to faith-promoting accounts, all while patiently awaiting the one grand prophecy that had yet to materialize. That's why you have to have all these dumbass prophecies in the meantime to keep the gullible contributing and working their asses off for gold that doesn't exist, never has, and never will be. The actual recovery of Nephite gold from the mountain. Yet the ore remained stubbornly out of reach. And time was running out for the aging Bishop Koyle. So, he's alive again. Going back to when he's alive. LDS authorities, for their part, were not content to let him carry on indefinitely, leading a quasi-schismatic venture. The final showdown was near, driven in large part by a rising LDS leader who had no tolerance for visionary folklore. One expects that under Heber J. Grant, and I think that he probably did not say it was okay to, start again, right? He started again regardless of Heber J. Grant not sanctioning it. So I'm thinking, so he sets it, he goes off again on his own thing, contrary to the advice of the church. So of course there's going to be a comeuppance eventually.
All right, let me grab this.
Was that a picture of the muddy water coming down the streets of Utah there?
Yes, these are actual photos from the flood in 1983 in northern Utah. Yes.
Wow.
Yep. So there's a close-up of that. There's another person there with their ruler in the water. You see the house there covered. There's another one. These are all actual photos from then.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
I wasn't in Utah, but still.
Yeah. The final showdown. So excommunication and end of an era. We'll meet another church leader here, one of our favorites. 1942, new apostle named Mark E. Peterson.
Marky Mark.
I grabbed a young picture of him because we've all seen the old version of Mark E. Peterson.
Is that him on the bottom?
No, that's Mr. Koyle. So top right there, Mark E. Peterson. Koyle immediately sensed trouble. Here comes another one. Koyle reputedly commented that, quote, that man will be the worst enemy the mind will ever have, unquote. And he wasn't wrong. Elder Mark E. Peterson, who also became the editor of the Deseret News. By the way, that's another path to being an apostle of the Lord, is working at the Deseret News. Boyd K. Packer could testify of that. Took a hard line against the Dream Mine. He penned a series of articles denouncing it, reiterating the official stance that it was a misguided enterprise at best. After tolerating Koyle's activities warily for years, church leaders now moved decisively to root out the problem. In 1947, the church convened a disciplinary council, a formal church trial for 83-year-old John Hyrum Koyle.
Oh,
I know, guy's on his way out. They just couldn't. Like, does that guy?
He's been working his whole life on a wing and a prayer.
Does he look like the kind of guy who's going to start a schism at this point? You know what I mean? He's been pretty loyal. Decades had passed since his initial dream, and he was in declining health. Again, this is 1894 to 1947. So we're 53 years past the original start of the mine.
I have an announcement to make, Bill.
Yeah, you have to go.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. No, I get it. You're having a good time.
I apologize, everybody. I was here just a little bit late. I thought it was going to be more late than I was. Bill covered for it excellently by doing the cold open, not knowing where the heck I was or if I was even going to appear. Finally made it, and I've got to deck out early. I apologize. How much more do you think you have, Bill?
There's maybe 40 slides. There's quite a bit.
40 left?
Yeah, there's no 40 slides total, somewhere in there.
Total. Okay.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Okay, well, I apologize. This has been so much fun. The time has flown.
Yeah, this is a fun little story. We'll finish it up with the audience. You have a good time in Vegas, and I'll see you in Southern Utah on Saturday.
Oh, right. I'm really looking forward to that.
What are we doing with Mormonism After Dark. Are you going to be around, or do you want me to figure something out for that?
No, I'll be around, and I was thinking that maybe we could talk about recent developments on the Michelle Stone front.
That'll be a fun little conversation. I'll see you then.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye-bye. Thanks, Bill.
All right. So let's see here. At this meeting, Koyle was presented with a prepared statement repudiating his own revelations. He was presented with a prepared statement repudiating his own revelations, essentially a forced confession that the dream mind prophecies were false and told to sign it or face excommunication at the ripe old age of 83. It was an agonizing demand. Signing would mean denying the spiritual experiences that had defined his life, but not signing meant being cut off from the church that he still loved. Under intense pressure, and reportedly with Mark Peterson looming, Koyle signed the statement. In January 1947, the Deseret News published this signed repudiation, allowing church leaders to say, see, even Koyle admits it was all untrue. And you'll see that here. So here's the Deseret News article, December 29th, 1945, renewed warning to the members of the church. So there's that. And this was one about the mine as well, but then the date here was January 1947. We'll get to that. So here's this article. So Deseret News, the main page there on the left, you can see the letter on the top left-hand corner, one column over. You can see the letter that he's got signed. It's over on the right as well. So the entire section that has to do with this dream mine is on the right, but I did make it even larger so that we could take a look at it, folks. So I want to read I'll go back here one. I want to read the very outside column first, and I split it up into 3 so that it would take up the width of this screen and we could read it. Stockholders asked to take similar stand. Spanish Fork, John H. Koyle, head of the so-called Dream Mine or Relief Mine, which is located in the mountains east of here, last night completely repudiated all claims to divine guidance with regard to the mine. He accepted fully and completely the stand of the First Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints regarding the mine, and retracted any and all statements he had made in which he said that the First Presidency were mistaken concerning this mine. He also called upon all of his followers and stockholders to make a similar repudiation and retraction, and asked them to regard this mine as a business venture without any religious significance. Accept statements. He accepted the published statement of the First Presidency concerning the Dream Mine and asked his followers to harmonize their thinking with the published statements of the First Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints with respect to the Dream Mine, and to honor and sustain the First Presidency as the only ones chosen of the Lord to give divine direction on any subject pertaining to the church at large. His statement was signed following a formal High Council trial held here last night, presided over by President William J. O'Brien of the Palmyra Stake, and his 2 counselors, J. Angus Christensen, they call him Angus Beef for short, and Wallace H. Gardner. I am the gardener here. What is it? The current bush. The statement was signed in the presence of the Stake High Council and was signed by 2 of Mr. Koyle's followers as legal witnesses. They are Quayle Dixon and Wallace Strong. So there's that. 2 Wallaces there. The document was then notarized by B.L. Isaac, Notary Public. Refers to document. The statement of the First Presidency referred to in the document executed by Mr. Koyle was published in the December 29th, 1945 issue of the church section of the Deseret News and reads as follows. That's this one here, December 29th, 1945. To officers and members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, from the day of Hiram Page, Doctrine and Covenants, section 28, at different periods, there have been manifestations from delusive spirits to members of the church, Sometimes these have come to men and women who, because of transgression, became easy prey to the arch deceiver. At other times, these people who pride themselves on their strict observance of the rules and ordinances and ceremonies of the church are led astray by false spirits who exercise an influence so imitative of that which proceeds from divine source that even these persons who think they are the very elect find it difficult to discern the essential difference. By the way, you cannot be the very elect unless you've received the second anointing. That's how you know you're the very elect. Satan himself has transformed himself to be apparently an angel of light. When visions, dreams, tongues, prophecy, impressions, or an extraordinary gift of inspiration conveys something out of harmony with the accepted revelations of the church or contrary to the decisions of its constituted authorities, Latter-day Saints may know that it is not of God, no matter how plausible it may appear. Also they, and then it goes to page 18. I don't have that here. I should have grabbed that, but I didn't. And then we've got the letter here. This is the letter that John claims that the church forced him to sign against his better judgment later on after the fact. And it says, I, John H. Koyle, do sustain the president of the church. I'm going to make this bigger and put me down below. I'll show those signatures later. I do sustain the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as the prophet, seer, and revelator of the Lord in this day. I do believe that the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints alone has the right to receive divine guidance for the people of the church as a whole, and am willing to sustain the first presidency of this church in all things, including their stand and instruction with regard to the so-called dream mine, of which I am the principal leader. I hereby repudiate all statements which I have made against the advice of the first presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as pertaining to this dream mine and my conduct of it. And I hereby repudiate all spiritual claims I have made with respect to the mine. I appeal to all of my followers to join with me in this repudiation. So this is just a reiteration of what we read in the side column. The church felt a need to re-emphasize this. I appeal to all of my followers to join with me in this repudiation of the claims to divine guidance in connection with this mine, and to regard this mine as a business venture without any religious significance. I also ask all stockholders, in this mine to harmonize their thinking with the published statement of the first presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints with respect to the dream mine, and to honor and sustain the first presidency as the only ones chosen of the Lord to give divine direction of any subject pertaining to the church at large. I ask my followers likewise to retract all statements they may have made to the effect that the authorities of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have been mistaken with regard to our mine. I think that's what that says. I appeal to all stockholders in this mine to rally around the authorities of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and give to them their undivided loyalty, which I now hereby do. I voluntarily do this of my own free will and choice. Signed, John H. Koyle. And you can see the witnesses there that they talked about. Quayle, Dixon, Wallace, Strong. I clipped off the bottom of that so that you can see the signatures again. State of Utah, Court of Utah, SS. Then it has the notary's stamp and signature. And then below that, commission expires April 7th. I just want to make sure this isn't. Yeah, above is a photographic reproduction of the statement in which John Koyle, for more than 50 years, the leading figure in the so-called dream mine near Spanish Fork, Utah, repudiated all divine claims. with respect to that mine. The document was executed last night following a formal High Council trial held at Spanish Fork and covering the claims that Koyle has made in the past with respect to the mine. Now, I want to note here, they have a disciplinary court. They present Koyle with this letter. Now, I assume Koyle believes that by signing this, he's not going to be in any trouble. He is going to be let off with a lighter sentence of punishment. Disfellowship, maybe, slap on the wrist. But he shouldn't have expected excommunication. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any purpose in signing this. So I'll just note that. Let me go back here. All right, so next. However, almost immediately, Koyle regretted it. He privately told his supporters that he had been coerced into signing it. He said it was the worst thing he ever did in his life. That's his words, not mine. The reprieve was short-lived anyway. Despite obtaining his signature, the LDS Church went ahead and formally excommunicated John H. Koyle on April 18th, 1948. After 54 years, Bishop Koyle was no longer a member of the church he believed he was trying to save. The following year, in May 1949, John Koyle passed away at age 84. According to a bit of poetic folklore, when Koyle heard that an LDS chapel he once attended was being demolished, he mused that his own death would follow soon, and indeed he died shortly after. Now, again, he was 80-something years old, and he was in failing health. His followers might call that a prophecy. I would call that living on borrowed time anyway. With his passing, many expected the Dream Mine saga to quietly fade as a quirky footnote of Mormon history. But the story didn't end there. And there's John Koyle in his 80s. It's sort of a sad story. I'll just note here, this is a drawing of, it's like an animated sort of drawing of the actual mine and the map of where they had dug. This map shows the extent of work done under Bishop Koyle until his death. Excuse me. May 17th, 1949. I'd love to know more about this hieroglyphic tunnel. I don't have any information on that, but that was mentioned in the other image as well. So that would be interesting. This is, I believe, an actual picture from the mine. You'll notice there on the wood house structure, office structure, whatever that is, that just before you enter the mine, the one thing you can clearly make out is no smoking. And it almost looks like maybe just above that, well, I was going to say Joseph Smith, but I don't think that's what it says. But you can clearly see the no smoking. You've got lots of people's initials, so kind of like the tree where you write the initials and say they were here, or maybe the back of the door of the bathroom stall. But the no smoking signs there, because even the miners, that most of them were probably Latter-day Saints, and it was certainly under a Latter-day Saint direction, so they wouldn't want to have any of that. This is that same picture from earlier. Just to note, there's a mention of a hieroglyphic tunnel and an ancient tunnel. I, again, would love to know what that is. So there's that. In a twist, the leadership of the mine company after Koyle's death fell to a new board of directors who were active, loyal Latter-day Saint members in good standing. In fact, some served in positions like High Counselor, stake president, even mission president. These new directors implemented a policy forbidding anyone excommunicated, which would mean Koyle's most ardent old-time followers, from buying more stock, possibly to thaw relations with the church. The Dream Mine, now under new management, seemed eager to show it wasn't a rebel breakaway sect. They rebranded slightly by forming a new corporation. In 1962, the Relief Mine Company was organized to take over from the old Koyle Mining Company. And we'll see that in some of the stock, which I found. So I'll show you images of that. You'll see the original, which was the Koyle Mining Company. You'll see a couple of others, which came later when it was under the name of the Relief Mine Company. This company still exists today. They carried on some limited mining operations through the 1960s, even as technology advanced. Miners burrowed deeper following Koyle's original blueprint of tunnels. Then, according to company reports, they hit an impenetrable layer of hard rock, a capstone, which they could not drill through with the available equipment. And if you remember, there was word earlier in this conversation that Koyle said the gold was just behind 3 feet of capstone. And from my study in this topic, it seems apparent that capstone means meeting some harder formation of rock that you can't get through, which they could not drill through with the available equipment. I believe this is a picture from the mine. Just crazy on a dream to dig that much. By the way, I don't remember what the guy's name was. I'm going to just look it up here really quick. But somebody last week in one of our episodes we put out, I think it was Mormonism Live last week, somebody suggested that we consider doing a story on, I'll get his name here in just a moment, Douglas Stringfellow, who was a Paul H. Dunn before there was a Paul H. Dunn. And it was a great suggestion. I ended up doing a bunch of research this week and put a slideshow together on Douglas Stringfellow, along with some old video footage that will play out here in a couple of weeks. So I just want to say thank you to the listener viewer who suggested that we ought to look into Douglas Stringfellow. I did that. And that will be a fun episode for the viewers here in a few weeks. So thank you. This is intriguing. This is going back to them meeting the capstone. This is intriguing because Koyle's 1894 dream had specifically mentioned a 3-foot capstone of solid rock guarding the treasure chamber. To believers, encountering an actual cap rock in the 1960s felt like prophecy, literally solidifying in front of them. Nevertheless, it was a showstopper. Lacking funds and facing astronomical costs to continue, the relief mine company halted excavation. The mountain's golden secrets, if any, remain sealed behind that stubborn stone. Since the 1970s, the Dream Mine had been effectively dormant in terms of mining, but very much alive as a legend. In 1970, church president Harold B. Lee, who you see in the top right corner there, saw fit to publicly reiterate the 1930 warning about dream mines. So earlier we mentioned that there was a warning put into the church periodical about dream mines and to stay away from them. And Harold B. Lee decided to reprint that article in 1970. And you can see part of that, a warning voice there down below his picture. So signaling that even decades later, enough folks still believed in Koyle to bother reminding the faithful it was off limits. The Mines Corporation diversified to survive. They started making money not from gold, but from more mundane sources. They operate a gravel pit, an orchard watered by the mine's natural springs, and even a rental home on the property. So they have found ways to at least bring in some income by operating those 3 ventures. And I think those are all running to this day. Anything to pay the property taxes and keep the lights on until that hoped for day when the prophecy is fulfilled. I'm just going to put the phone number up on the screen. If folks will just give me a second, I'm going to start the call-in portion of the show. We still have a few more slides to do, but this will give you guys a chance to get in. I'm going to pause my my sound for just 2 seconds and let my phone ring through, and then I'll answer that, and then we can keep going. All right, so let's continue. Okay, so here is another picture. The Dream Mine view from Salem, Utah. There's the mine entrance. You've got the processing facility there right in the center of the screen. You've got the Relief Mine Company headquarters, which is its own building there. This was in the summer of 2005. Legally and financially, by the way, folks, you can call in at 662-667-6667 or 662 Mormons. And if you'd rather come right into the studio, you certainly can do that. I just put that into the live chat, the StreamYard link. And we'd love to have you come into the show either by phone call or come directly into the studio. I always say this, I know it gets old, but for somebody, I never want someone to get doxxed if they didn't want to be. If you want to be anonymous, just put a different name in than your real name and make sure your camera is off. But we'd love to have you join the show. Okay, legally and financially, the Dream Mine has had a few aftershocks. The IRS audited the Relief Mine Company in 1981, likely to ensure it wasn't an abusive tax shelter. And with so many stockholders over the decades, the company has to maintain proper filings. In modern times, the stock isn't publicly traded on any exchange, but there is a shadow market among believers. In 1984, company officials claimed over 6,000 stockholders held Dream Mine shares. By 2010, records showed at least 706 active stockholders. And by 2018, the board reported more than 7,500 stockholders, again, suggesting a resurgence of interest. Shares that have essentially never paid a dividend still change hands, sometimes at inflated prices. One report noted that though a share's book value might be $10, buyers were paying up to $30 to $35 out of pure speculation or faith. Imagine paying over 300% of face value for stock in a mine that hasn't produced an ounce of gold in its entire 125 plus years. That is the power of belief. And we're getting here ready to wrap up here, folks. So if you do want to call in, please do that now, 662-667-6667, or come into the studio with the link there that was in the live chat. This is one of the original certificates. This is the Koyle Mining Company. You see the original name looks like it's crossed off. Koyle Mining Company. Let's see here. Transferable only on the books of the corporation on surrender of this certificate properly endorsed. And it's got John Koyle's signature there. Looks like his hand's a little shaky. You've got D. Koyle. And you've got all that dated. It looks like I don't know if that's 1906, but there's a share there. And then you get these ones from the Relief Mine. So here's one, the Relief Mine. This is from 1965, February 19th, 1965. And now the mine's under new ownership. It's got a new name. That's so appropriate in Mormonism for it to be given a new name. That's great. And then here's another one. This is 1993. That one was 1965. The Relief Mine. So there is all of that. Anyway, quite interesting. So there's a few more slides here. Culturally, the Dream Mine story lingers in Utah lore. It's the subject of articles, books, still fireside chats from time to time, and plenty of jokes as well. It's not uncommon for locals to drive by the old mine site, which is closed to the public, and swap tales of what's supposedly in there. An online community of dream miners even sprang up in the 2000s with email lists and forums where believers discuss Koyle's prophecies and parse current events for signs of the coming collapse. I'm just going to go back here and look. So 2000s. And just to note again, 2010, 706 active stockholders. 2018, 7,500 stockholders. So again, increased interest again. Probably highly due to all of the conversation happening behind the scenes where people are working out when Koyle's prophecy about the mine will come true based on all of his past prophecies giving him credibility. For instance, during the 2016 US presidential election, some fans of the mine speculated that Donald Trump's campaign might fulfill one of Koyle's longstanding prophecies. In one of his dreams, Koyle saw a Republican elephant fall over during an election and never get up again. This was interpreted by a few as a metaphor for a future political or economic upheaval, perhaps a Republican president's death or the collapse of the GOP, leading to national chaos. As with such prophecies, the interpretations are all over the map, and so far none have clearly materialized. Again, Trump getting reelected this time around put sort of a death knell on that proposed interpretation of the prophecy. Still, the faithful keep watch. As recently as 2016, a token amount of mining labor is performed each year at the site, just to keep the mining claims legally active. It's as if they're keeping the pilot light on, ready to fire up full-scale operations at the literal drop of a hat. So again, it's the moment they find a gold flake, they are going to jump back in. So there's that. This was one of the interior pictures from the mine. One of the interior pictures from the mine. So supplies and stuff. I got no idea what any of those tools do or how they're used, but that is a photo from it. And then just to note, bizarre episodes in prophecies, a closer look. So these were the things that he claimed. The Nephite visitors, they told him about that water. So he was told the time it would happen. I think that was from Moroni. Then he visits with the two of the three Nephites. He contradicts the president of the church on the Mexican temple. He predicts the 1929 stock market crash. Again, these are all allegedly. I couldn't find any substance to any of these prophecies that would give any sort of heavy weight to them. The few of them that we do at least have dates of events. Even those dates aren't quite exact what he said. So the 1929 stock market crash, the prophecy of World War II's end, the Muddy Waters flood from 1983, the capstone conundrum of meeting the 3-foot capstone. They did hit a capstone and have not, I don't think, I haven't read anything where they got through that. And then modern prophetic speculations. The appeal of the dream mine, folklore, faith, and fallout. The dream mine appealed to believers because it echoed early Mormonism's magical worldview. And so I put a picture there of the late D. Michael Quinn, early Mormonism and the magic worldview. Because it echoed the early magical worldview, visions, buried treasure, and divine destiny at a time when the church was shifting toward institutional control and away from folk spirituality. For followers, it wasn't just a financial investment, it was a sacred mission tied to end-time survival and a sense of spiritual insider knowledge. Koyle's mine offered meaning, hope, identity, especially during economic uncertainty. Meanwhile, the church leaders saw it as a threat to authority, unity, and financial loyalty, condemning it as misguided even as it echoed their own founding narratives, which we talked about throughout this episode. The story of John Hyrum Koyle and the Dream Mine is a uniquely Mormon blend of faith, folklore, and failed prophecy. A humble bishop claimed he was shown a Nephite gold mine in a dream. By the way, if the Nephites had gold, it would be in the form of plates. Digging into hard rock to find gold ore would have nothing to do with Nephites other than them showing, other than the two of the three Nephites or Moroni, showing him that, hey, here's a hill with some gold ore in it. But that would have no connection to the Nephites. But don't let the facts stop us. A Nephite gold mine in a dream destined to save the church in the last days. What followed was a century-long saga of digging, devotion, and defiance, pitting grassroots revelation against institutional authority. For questioning and former Mormons, it feels like a lost chapter of church history. Equal parts Joseph Smith and Utah folk legend. It's comical, stock in godless Sorry, in goldless mines still selling in 2025. I mean, imagine that. All those years later, not a drop of gold. And in fact, when geologists study the mine, they say you're just not going to find any. This is the kind of mountain that will never have gold in it. And because of a religious belief, there is justification in continuing the mine and pressing forward. It's tragic, a man excommunicated for his convictions, and it's mysterious what lies beyond that capstone. In the end, the dream mine is a metaphor as much as a mine, an enduring symbol of how far people will go to find meaning, prepare for catastrophe, and believe in something bigger than themselves. Gold or no gold, the dream mine lives on, waiting like a buried treasure it promised for someone willing to dig. There's another picture from the processing facility as it overlooks the land there. It's a beautiful view. Gorgeous. There's a picture of the processing facility as it sits up on the mountain. Again, the only thing they ever got was $104 worth of platinum. Isn't that crazy? There's another picture from a little distance away. And that, my friends, is the end of the show tonight. So now let me just see if we've got no calls. And so we'll just end the show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I will say this again, I'm always asking for folks who support our show. Thank you. We appreciate each and every one of you. I'm going to take that off. If you would please go to mormonismlive.org, click the donate button. $5 or $10 a month makes all the difference in the world. Donations go up and down. And, the economy, people have a lot of worries. And we've seen some cancellations come in the last few days, actually last few weeks. And if anybody out there is able or willing to be a supporter of the program, please join the team by going to mormonismlive.org. Click the donate button, set up a recurring donation of $5 or $10 a month. If you can do more, that's great. We really do appreciate all of you who support our show at whatever degree you do. For those who are able to donate more, thank you. And please become a recurring subscriber today. But folks, very much appreciate everybody who joins every week to watch our programs. I hope you learned tonight about the dream mine. It's one more cool story in Mormonism, and Mormonism just never runs out of cool stories. So join us Friday night for Mormonism After Dark. Oh, what's the call-in number? It is 662-667-6667. If you call in here in the next few seconds, I'll hang around and take that call, Scott. So I'll hang on here for a moment. This Douglas Stringfellow story was crazy too. And this dream mine story I thought was crazy. And it was one that I had read about a little bit. I had heard little rumblings and read a little thing here or there, but I did not know the full scope of this story. And so I'm glad that you guys enjoyed it. Lots of folks are saying that. Very enjoyable and entertaining. Thanks, Bill. Very interesting. Good show, Bill. Thanks. Good night. Good night. Love the show. Great picture. Rock and or roll is a victory for Satan. And sorry, being here by yourself and trying to run a live show, you sort of have to stop and just check it in. Oh, Scott, 662-667-6667. 662-667-6667. And I'll put it here at the bottom. You can see it scrolling there at the bottom. 662-667-6667. And would welcome you coming in to the show. So I'm going to just grab you. It looks like you're screening, so I'm just going to grab that here. Is this Scott? Hello? Let me try something here. Scott, are you there? All right, I'm going to try this one another way. Bear with us, folks. Thank you so much. Bluetooth. Connect. Let's try this one more time. Scott, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
I hear you now, my friend. You're on the show.
Oh, perfect. Hey, I love the show. The Dream Mind stuff is some of my favorite stuff that I've loved reading about. And I think one interesting thing that I didn't hear mentioned, I think they believed, I think partly, that they might hit gold, like ore that they were going to mine, but I think there was also a pretty big belief that there was like a treasure room under that mountain, that the Nephites had gathered a bunch of gold. We've heard of, stories of caverns filled with gold plates and things like that. And I think they thought they were going to find a cavern like that. And so I think that's partly why the geologic stuff didn't bother people so much, because they thought there was just some hidden room that they were going to run into that was filled with, gold that the Nephites had already done the work on.
Well, that would explain why there was nothing in the hill Cumorah in Palmyra, because it had simply been moved.
Could be that they moved all those. Yeah. There's a lot of interesting lore. Go ahead.
No. You finish, please.
One of my favorite little stories there, somewhere along the line when the mine was having trouble, there was this guy that showed up from Texas, and I can't remember his name, but he was sort of this mysterious figure that like knew a lot about the mine already, and he walked around town, and he was smoking and kind of doing all this crazy stuff, but he injected some money into the mine later in the story. And somehow, rumors started, as they do in Mormonism. Somehow people came to believe that that was Alma the Younger that had been sent to somehow help the mine. And so there was this mysterious, colorful guy from Texas that showed up, and that ended up being part of the lore too. And that's one of my favorite stories of the lore.
Yeah, it is interesting. Again, nothing found, but it's amazing what people can do when they believe in something. And I go back to thinking of like the Kirtland Temple or the Nauvoo Temple, and the people of that day building that thing and what their skill sets were. Again, there were definitely skilled laborers who worked on those buildings, but there were also a lot of people who did not have those skill sets. And those buildings are huge. I'm down here in southern Utah, and I see the St. George Temple, which was built in the late 1800s. And it's just incredible, the structure that is for its day. And when you look at Kirtland and Nauvoo, same thing. And the same thing with this mine. I mean, what people were willing to do on a mustard seed of faith, so to say. It's quite impressive. But thank you, Scott. Thank you for the phone call. Anything else you want to say?
No, thank you for the show. I love this lore, so I appreciate it.
Have a great night, my friend.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
And we've got another call here, I believe. So that one looks like they hung up. So not sure what happened there. But if somebody wants to call in, I will hang around for another minute or two. 662-667-6667. Otherwise, we'll end the show. I'm just checking the comments, folks. I did see that. I put that up earlier, DM, but just to note, yeah, Mormonism is fascinating. Its history, for sure. As much for sure, so much to unpack. I think there will always be things to learn. And I'll just know, I mean, I've had my anger stage against the church. I certainly still get frustrated from time to time. But I tell everybody I run across that Mormonism is the most fascinating history packed into 200 years of a particular religious system. There is no such thing as a religious system with more fascinating history than the LDS Church. Just insane, the number of stories. You know, Albert Carrington and not penetrating more than 4 inches, such as adultery. The James Brewster story, the Richard Lyman, where the Spencer Kimball and the Salt Lake City law enforcement kicks down his door. Mormonism just goes and goes and goes. Just the craziest stories, and it never ends. And RFM and I continue after decades of studying this church with intensity. We continue to find new things all the time. Multiple times a year, we discover new things. And I think that's what makes this religion so cool. And I think it's a big part of why folks like you continue to listen long after you've stepped away. Part of it, I think, is to make sense of what happened to you, to process what this thing did to you. But I also don't think Mormon washes off easy. And I think all of us still have some sort of odd fascination with this religion still. So there's that. All right, no more calls, folks. Thank you so much. Have a great night. Please support the program. I'm hoping after this program ends, I'll go into the email and I'll see that a few new donations came in. It would mean a lot to me. It would mean a lot to RFM. For those of you who are coming to Southern Utah this weekend to visit with me in RFM, we can't wait to see you. It's going to be a ton of fun. Excited to see you there. And otherwise, we'll see you Friday for Mormonism After Dark, 8 p.m. Mountain Time. Have a great night, everybody. Bye-bye.